Okay, welcome everybody. So this is the second part of our talk on Michael Porter's essay on competitive advantage. In the first talk, we talked about barriers to entry. All right, so if you have a very successful business, again, whether commercial or nonprofit, and other entrepreneurs are looking at you saying, wow, I wonder if I could duplicate that. I wonder if I could get a share of this. Which is eventually going to cut into your profits, then if other businesses can get in fairly easily, that is going to knock your rate of return down to fairly ordinary levels. Okay, and in those kind of sectors, what you will see is that people can run businesses essentially earning an ordinary living, but they're not going to become millionaires. What are some businesses with easy entry, with low barriers to entry? There's a few. It turns out you don't need a large capital investment to start up sort of a simple restaurant or coffee shop. Nobody's going to become a millionaire doing that, but you can earn a living at it. Dry cleaning. In any town you go to, even here in Bloomington, which is not a very big place, you see lots of dry cleaning firms, and that's because there is sort of a fairly fluid market in buying the equipment you need. You just need a small building, you install the stuff, and you're ready to go. Becoming a real estate agent. There is brand differentiation for the very, very successful ones, but if you just want to hang up your shingle, you actually don't have to go through a lot to enter that business, and so there's a fair amount of entry into being a real estate agent, and unless you have very special skills, you're not going to get really rich at it, even if you are in a city with fairly high house prices and thus fairly high commissions. Because lots of people are going to say, wow, I could make high commissions too. That means lots of competition, and that means fairly ordinary wages. Okay, so that's what we talked about in the first video. The second video Porter wants to talk about is, well, okay, suppose you have a business. How do you actually earn those high returns? Like, how do you make those revenues far in excess of costs, whether you're a commercial or a nonprofit business? And his analysis says, well, it's when you've got power. Okay, it's when you have some kind of power. So there's a couple of angles to look at it, but we don't want to belabor this. So let's just look at the situation where suppose you are selling something. Okay, suppose you're selling something. You are in a strong position if the people who buy from you, your buyers, are weak. You're in a relatively weaker position if your buyers are strong. If your buyers are strong, that's going to cut into your net revenues. It's going to keep it such that you don't really get a chance to earn much profit at all. And so in the notes, and this is on page 3 of the lecture notes, I start to list, well, when are buyers actually going to be powerful? When are they going to have a lot of market power? So again, let me turn to my slide deck here. When do we have strong buyers? And Porter lists 5, and these seem pretty reasonable, and I don't have anything to add to this. He says, 1, suppose there's only a few buyers and they're buying at large volume, okay? If you only have a couple of buyers, they have a fair amount of market power, okay? They will try to negotiate with you because they know that you need them. If you only have a couple of buyers buying at large volume, the thing you cannot afford is to lose them, okay? So if you're in any kind of business where you think, okay, we are selling something, we only have a few purchasers, but each of them is fairly important to us, they're in a strong position and you're not, okay? That's why it's always a good idea to diversify your revenue sources as much as possible. You don't want to be dependent on just a couple of people, right? Okay. Second, undifferentiated product. The people you sell to, the buyers, are going to be fairly powerful if you're selling something pretty much identical to what a lot of other people are selling. Okay? Because that means they can always switch. They can always switch suppliers. They can always go to somebody else. And so that means you are not going to be in a very strong position relative to them. So you're going to have a better chance at having sort of good returns and a bit of market power if you're selling something special. If you're selling something where, in fact, buyers could go to somebody else, but it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the thing that you are offering. all right? So that would tend to weaken it as well. What's the third one? The product is a big part of the buyer's budget, okay? This is kind of a weird one here. Suppose you're selling something and it is for any of your buyers sort of a major purchase for them. If it's a major purchase for them, excuse me, they're going to be very careful on price, right? They're going to look at it very closely because they're going to say, wow, you know, we got to make sure we can get a good deal on this. We're going to be very price conscious because this is a big part of our budget. When things are only a small part of buyers' budgets, you actually have a lot of flexibility on your price, okay? So just to take an example, let's think of ordinary household items like salt, okay? Now, I've been buying groceries for myself for over 4 decades, and I use salt in cooking. And if you ask me right now, what is the price of a container of salt at Kroger? Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. I'd probably be off by a factor of 2. Who knows? And the reason who knows is because I actually don't pay attention to price. Okay, what I do when I go shopping is if I need salt, I buy salt. And it's a tiny part of my budget, and so it's not going to be the case where I'm going to say, wow, salt is really expensive, so I'm not going to buy any this time. I just grab it when I need it. But when you think about it, that puts the salt seller in a really good position. Even though they're selling something that is fairly low price to most people, and you think, well, how are you going to make money off that? They're selling something where people are just not going to be very price conscious, right? Because you just get salt when you need salt. So it's kind of ironic, don't you think? But in fact, you actually have a lot of market power over your buyers if you're selling them something where you're selling to millions of people, but for each of them, it's only a tiny part of their budget, right? Okay. Fourth, the buyer is another firm. One of the things we know from market research is, and you will find this when you go off in the world, it is trickier to sell to other companies than it is to households because other companies tend to have a whole bunch of rules and regulations and procedures on requisitioning goods and searching out the best price. Okay, so for example, when I moved to Bloomington, I had been living in suburban Atlanta for a couple of years, and Indiana University, like most university employers for faculty, said, hey, we'll pay for your moving costs. Well, great, that's a nice benefit. So how did they do that? Well, Indiana University did not just say to me, okay, go find a mover, hire them, send us the bill, and we'll reimburse you. They did not do it like that. Instead, Indiana University said, send us 3 estimates from different companies and we'll pick one. All right? Now, I told the moving companies when they came to me that this was the deal. They had to be fairly price conscious, right? They had to be fairly price conscious because they knew that it's going to be a company, it's going to be somebody sitting at a desk. They're not actually the person moving, but it's going to be somebody else who decides what firm to use. But that actually put Indiana University in a strong position, right? Because they're buying as a firm, they're more price conscious, in fact, more so than, in fact, I would have been. So that tends to drive the price down. So when firms are buyers, they tend to be tougher. And what's the last one? Buyer can make instead of buy. Well, earlier this semester, we talked about the make or buy problem, right? So both households and firms always have this choice to make about, well, here's a thing we need. Is it something we can just make ourselves? Or should we buy it in the market? Well, if they have the option of making it themselves, that gives them some power, right? So if I'm selling something to somebody and they're saying, yeah, we're buying it from you, but we could do it ourselves, that means they have to be fairly competitive. And so, spring is finally arriving here in Bloomington, and I have never hired a lawn care firm. All right, I've always just mowed the grass myself. And my teenagers are now old enough to do it too. But I've done most of the stuff in the yard myself. I've never hired anybody unless it's a really big, complicated job like, removing some trees or something like that. But otherwise, I just take care of the yard myself. Well, I'm in the same position as lots of people, and that means if I were running a lawn care company in Bloomington, I'm not in a really strong market position. Think about running a lawn care company. It's a hard way to make a living because, first of all, you're competing with a bunch of people in a market that is undifferentiated. Okay, so I can mow your lawn or somebody else can mow your lawn, but we're pretty much going to do the same thing. So I'm selling an undifferentiated product, so that doesn't help. I'm also selling something that's kind of pricey. It's not like salt. And so buyers are going to be fairly price conscious. Am I going to hire this landscape firm or that one for lawn care? And that's going to make it tough. But then another thing that makes it even tougher is, of course, people have the option of just mowing the lawn themselves. Right? They can either push a lawnmower around or they can go and buy a ride-on if they're getting older, they have a huge lawn. But households have the option of, cutting their own grass rather than hiring anybody else. And that puts lawn care firms in a tough situation, okay? So what I've listed here, what I've gone through here is sort of 5 situations where we're looking at a seller looking at buyers. When is the seller in a strong position? In other words, when are buyers weak? And when are the buyers in a strong position? So the seller is in a strong position if there's lots of buyers, not just a few. They're selling a differentiated product, not something that people can just get from anybody else. They're selling something that, strangely enough, is not that important to buyers, so people are not going to be that price conscious. You're not selling to firms, but you're selling to households who tend to be a bit casual about their budgets, and you're selling something that's tough for people to make themselves. Okay, that's when a firm selling is going to be in a strong position, and that is the sort of second part of Porter's analysis of what gives firms competitive advantage. So, thanks very much.